Hotel and Guest House Accommodation Amendment Bill 2018. This Council resumes the second reading debate on the Fire Safety Industrial Buildings Bill.
Mr. Tony Chair, Chairman of the Bills Committee on the bill, will first address the Council on the Bills Committee report. Mr. Tony Chair. Thank you, Madam Deputy. As Chairman of the Bills Committee on Fire Safety Industrial Buildings Bill, I'd like to highlight the salient points of deliberation by the Bills Committee. The bill seeks to provide for a regulatory mechanism under which the Director of Fire Services and Director of Buildings, as the enforcement authorities, would be empowered to take various enforcement actions to require owners and occupiers of IBs constructed or with building plans first submitted for approval on or before the 1st of March 1987 to upgrade the fire safety of such buildings to the required standards. The Bills Committee held 5 meetings with the administration, and in one of the meetings, deputations were received and public views were heard. The Bills Committee in general supported the legislative proposals in order to improve the fire safety standards of target IBs. They noted that there are about 1,100 IBs constructed in or before 1987, which would be regulated, and there would also be 2 stages of implementation, starting with some 400 IBs constructed or with building plans first submitted for approval in or before March 1973. For the remaining target IBs, they would be included in the second phase of the bill's implementation. Members noted that upon the commencement of the bill, the enforcement authorities, i.e. the FSD and also the Buildings Department, would conduct inspection on these IBs, and for those who have not been able to comply with the standards set out in Division 1 and 2, in Table 1 and 2 of the bill, they would be issued with directions requiring them to comply with the relevant requirements within a specified time, and for owners and occupiers, whether or not they are able to comply with the requirements, there are some concerns. In particular, for some buildings, because of the physical constraints, the owners and occupiers might not be able to carry out these improvement works because of technical difficulty. For example, the installation of fire service water tanks or water supply for the automatic sprinkler system or the fire hydrant and hose reel system. The administration note that so long as the basic fire safety is not compromised, so they would be prepared to be flexible so that in accordance with Clause 7, they would be prepared to give direction so that alternative measures can be adopted where appropriate. Members noted this. On top of that, with regard to the justifications provided by the owners or occupiers and also the scale of the works, reasonable time limit could also be extended upon application. As to whether or not technical and financial assistance can be provided to assist them in carrying out improvement works, the administration has said that at present, according to their estimate, it would cost them about $200,000 to $300,000 per unit, and that should be affordable to them. And if they have any difficulties, then they can always apply to the Building Safety Loan Scheme, and which is kept at $1 million per unit of accommodation, and that should be affordable. And the 2 EAs would also assign case officers to follow up on cases of individual target IBs and provide technical advice and assistance. Members noted that if the owners or occupiers have failed to comply with the relevant directions, then the EAs can apply to the District Court for a prohibition order to prohibit the use of the relevant part of the building by the owner or occupier, And the objective is to enhance the safety of the building instead of dealing with the fire risk arising from the occupation of the relevant IB or part of it. And therefore, members question whether or not there is a need for the prohibition order to be provided for under the bill. The administration explained that that is to prevent any substantial fire risk arising from the occupation of the relevant IB or part of it when the owner or occupier concerned has failed to comply with an FSD or FSCO, thereby ensuring public safety, and therefore they are applying for this. And in doing so, they would also be very careful in considering that from the angle of public safety. And also after the prohibition order has been issued, other than the fact that they would have to post the PO in the part of the building, they would also have to serve a copy of that to the relevant owner or occupier. And members note that if it's only served on the occupier, then the owner of the IB might not be aware of the fact that the court has already issued this PO. And members ask how the administration can be sure that the copy of the PO can be served on the relevant owner or occupier. In response to this, the administration agreed to amend the bill to mandate that both the owner and the occupier should be served a copy of the PO, and also the PO should also be posted at a conspicuous place, and they would also have to use practical means to serve it on the owner and occupier. And also, the enforcement agencies can also enter the target industrial buildings without warrant. Members question whether or not that is necessary, and whether or not that would also infringe on the right of the owner or of the occupiers concerned. The administration explained that that is to ensure that the authorized officers will be able to conduct day-to-day inspection, and also they will also be able to enter the building in order to conduct the relevant inspections, and therefore it is provided that they would only be able to do so when they are discharging their duties. Madam Deputy, other than the amendments that I've just mentioned, the Bills Committee also noted that the administration would be moving a few amendments, and the drafting of the amendments would also be moved. And concerning the amendments to be moved by the administration, and also the resumption of second reading debate on the bill, the Bills Committee has raised no objection. Next, I'd like to elaborate on my views on the bill. Well, in enhancing the safety of industrial buildings, I'm sure majority of us would not have any objection to that. And I'm happy to see that the administration has taken up this role. Instead of just monitoring and also enforcing the law, it would also be acting as a facilitator. Some IBs, because of physical constraints, they might not be able to upgrade their standards, and we will also have to look at whether or not it is practicable, and also whether or not there are replacement alternatives. And the administration has adopted a flexible approach so that they would be pragmatic and flexible in dealing with each and every case in order to promote and assist the IB, so that without compromising fire safety, they would like to assist these IBs in attaining the latest standards. However hard you try to improve the hardware, you may not be able to achieve the best result, because the most important thing is both the occupiers and the tenants would comply with the relevant regulations. It's like what happened 4 years ago in Ngau Tau Kok, the mini storage or warehouse had this fire lasting for over 100 hours, and that's because they had stored some goods in the warehouses without the relevant fire safety installations and so on. And in some of the IBs, they've also been illegally sublet with subdivided flats, and that would also increase fire risk. And also illegal building structures would also directly affect the structure of the buildings concerned. That's why if people do not comply with the law, and if they just misuse the buildings, however hard we try to improve the hardware, however hard we try to improve on the legislation, is not going to be effective. That said, in coming up with legislation, we should also ensure that we would not be overdoing it, because overregulation would also be stifling the use and potential of industrial buildings. And I would also like to say that I expect that in enhancing building safety, the administration would also enhance its efforts other than increasing or improving the awareness of owners. The general public should also have a better understanding of fire safety to industrial buildings. These are my remarks. I support the second reading of the bill.
Mr. Low Wai Kwok. Madam Deputy, the Fire Safety Industrial Buildings Bill seeks to establish a regulatory regime for the Director of Fire Services and Director of Buildings to take various enforcement actions to require buildings constructed or with building plans first submitted to the building authority for approval on or before the 1st of March 1987. The fire safety standards of these buildings should be raised to prescribed standards. The bill was introduced to the Council on the 12th of December 2018. A Bills Committee was set up. I was a member of the BC, and on the 16th of June 2019, we were given notice that the scrutiny of the bill has been completed. But as we all know, in the past half year or so, it was impossible for the Council to operate in a normal manner. So it was not until the 8th of June 2020 that the House Committee could consider the report from the Bills Committee. The report said that most members are in support of the bill to enhance the safety standards of industrial buildings. The BC will not move any amendments and have noted that the administration is going to move 2 sets of amendments to the bill, and the BC has no strong views about that. The purpose of the bill is really needed in reality, because under Cap 502 Fire Safety Commercial Premises Ordinance and Fire Safety Buildings Ordinance Cap 572, there are requirements for certain kinds of commercial premises or commercial buildings and certain kind of composite buildings and domestic buildings to enhance their fire safety measures for better protection for occupants and users and visitors. However, industrial buildings are not subject to the regulatory framework under the 2 mentioned ordinances. The planning, design, and construction of an industrial building, or IB, requires compliance with the prevailing buildings ordinance, Cap 123, and its subsidiary legislation, as well as the codes of practice enforced at the time of submission of the relevant building plans, including the requirements on fire safety construction as stipulated in the codes of practice published by the Buildings Department, and requirements on the provision of fire safe surface installations and equipment according to the Code of Practice on Minimum Fire Surface Installations and Equipment published by the FSD. Most IBs comply with the prevailing fire safety standards at the time of the construction. However, for the fire safety standards may be a bit different from the prevailing standards, because members of the public are concerned about fire risks of some industrial buildings. The administration is of the view that it is necessary to put in place measures to enhance the safety standards of IBs built on or before the 1st of March 1987. The Bills Committee has raised a number of concerns during its deliberations. First, the scope of application of the bill. According to the administration, there are about 1,100 IBs constructed in or before 1987, and that should cover the majority of the buildings to be regulated under the bill. Once the bill is enacted for implementation, FSD and BD will have to carry out comprehensive inspection. The bill will be implemented in 2 phases. with the first phase covering 400 IBs constructed or with building plans first submitted for approval in or before March 1997. As majority of these IBs were not installed with automatic sprinkler system, and then come the second phase, and other remaining target IBs will be included. The level of works required will depend on the floor height and square and area, and also current FSIs. As said by many members, because of the revitalization IB scheme, some buildings may already have the approval to allow non-industrial activities. So should the bill apply to buildings that have been converted? According to administration, some IBs might have been converted to accommodate non-industrial users. The bill still applies. Secondly, will alternative measures be acceptable? Now, according to the administration, it has to take into account that for owners dealing with improvements of the FSIs, there are physical constraints, may not be able to install water tank, a water sprinkler system, and also a fire hose system. According to the administration, FSD and BD will deal with each and every case in a flexible manner. If the owner or occupier face practical difficulties, for instance, if there are physical constraints and space constraints, or making the fire safety requirement listed in the proposed Schedule 1 or 2 to the bill infeasible, then under Clause 7 of the bill, the owner or occupier can use alternative measures listed in Clause 7. And if the owner or occupier encounter practical difficulties in complying with the fire safety requirements, then they can give justifications to the authority and propose alternative measures to comply with the requirements. According to the administration, it will consider each and every case in a flexible manner, and the standards of the alternative measures must not be in contravention of Clause 11, and that is the defense to the offense of reasonable excuse for not complying with FSD. Under Clause 12 of the bill, FSD and BD will each set up their own advisory committee chaired by their deputy director. And members will be representatives of the two departments, relevant professionals, academics, and members of the public with the relevant expertise, so as to over-advise on the proposed alternative measures from different perspectives. I believe we all agree to the objective of the bill and support the government's approach in dealing with individual cases in a flexible manner. However, target owners and occupiers of targeted IBs may encounter technical or financial difficulties. Some members stress that the administration should provide due support. The administration said that FSD and BD will have a case officer to provide technical advice and assistance and to address problems associated works. As regards financial support, if an owner of a target IB needs it, he can apply for a loan under the Building Safety Loan Scheme for carrying out maintenance and repair works to reinstate and improve the safety of the buildings, including the fire safety requirements contained in the bill, subject to a ceiling of $1 million per unit of accommodation. I believe that will provide sufficient physical assistance to the owners of the target IBs. The public as well as members are concerned about fire safety in old IBs. The bill will enhance protection to the lives and properties of owners. We are happy to see that finally we can see the bill's second reading, because we've only got 1 month or so to go before this term of the council ends. As we all know, all bills that cannot be completed and passed before the end of this term will lapse, and that means all the efforts would have gone down the drains, and there's a waste of resources. With regard to the 2 sets of amendments to be proposed by the Secretary, they are technical in nature and should be supported. With these remarks, I urge members to support the passage of the Fire Safety Industrial Buildings Bill and the CSAs to be moved by the S4S.
譚文豪議員。
Mr. Jeremy Tam. Madam Deputy, this is a bill which is what I believe majority of the councillors will support in this council is quite rare. Well, this is about fire safety in industrial buildings, and I was also a member of the Bills Committee, and I made quite a few suggestions at the Bills Committee. Initially, we were quite concerned that to authorize the FSD and the BD colleagues to enter the premises, would there be problems? And also, when it comes to their powers, would there be similar arrangements under other pieces of legislation to authorize them to enter IBs to carry out inspections? And the administration acted quite expeditiously. So that's something that we should give credit to them. And the colleagues from the administration immediately supplied a lot of useful information to us to allay or address some of our concerns. I hope that that kind of professionalism in treating a bill can also be extended to other bills tabled by the administration. At the time, I also found that there would be other problems, and the Security Bureau also agreed that the wording could also be changed. And let me go through them very quickly and explain why I asked them to change the wording. Well, I pointed out that in serving a copy of the prohibition order to the relevant parties, how that should be done. Well, in the original wording, that was not entirely clear. For example, so long as the copy has been posted in the in a conspicuous part of the building, for example, the entrance to the building, that would be okay. Or they also refer to an alternative means of serving. Okay, so on A, they said that you could post it at the entrance of a building, and then second, you cannot use alternative means to serve it on the owner or occupier. So on the face of it, it would appear that so long as you have posted it on the building, then whether or not you would resort to the alternative means of serving it on the relevant party might not be necessary. So even if you fail to do that, it still can be treated as if you have already served it on the owner or occupier. And of course, the administration's explanation was that it's not true. But then when this is not entirely clear, then of course the administration has the duty to clarify it. In particular, at the Bills Committee, the purpose of our scrutinizing the bill was to ensure that everything would be set out very clearly, and that's why there will be a CSA to change the wording. Another change is that whether or not it's clause 24B is about the serving of the PO on the owner or occupier. Well, that's a problem because the occupier might not be the owner. So as far as the owner is concerned, he has already leased the premises to the occupier, and if you only serve it on the occupier rather than the owner, then I, as the owner, despite the fact that my premises have already had this order served, I might not be aware of it. And on the contrary, I'm just a tenant because I'm the occupier. And if there are things that might not be in compliance with the rules and regulations, and if you just inform the owner without me being notified, then I might have carried out decoration works and so on. Well, in an IB, I might have this food processing license, and then in the course of the operation, I might not be aware that you have breached certain rules and regulations, and the PO doesn't say that you will have to serve the PO on me as well. Then that's not fair to me. So the administration was prepared to accept what I said on that occasion, so that instead of stating the owner or occupier, it has now changed it to both the owner and occupier would have to be served a copy of the PO. So in principle, we support this bill because, as I said, the main purpose is to enhance IB's fire safety, and the most important thing is to authorize specified personnel to enter the premises, because in the past the problem was if they had to apply for a court order, then it would be a very cumbersome procedure, and as a result, in dealing with these IBs with fire safety risks, they would find it very difficult, and therefore we are just reasoning things with them. So these are my remarks. Thank you.
Honorable Gary Chan. Thank you, the Deputy President. I speak to support this fire safety industrial building bill. Well, we all understand the objective of the bill is to enhance fire safety. I remember quite a few years ago, there was a similar ordinance which regulate the older buildings. Well, on the implementation of that bill ordinance, there have been some difficulty where some of the structural or the design not able to meet with the latest requirements, and therefore there led to some backlash, and the government can also have some alternative measures and resolve this. So when this time the government had tabled this fire safety industrial building bill, I am quite concerned that whether that the members' concern will resurface. And after the Bills Committee deliberation, I see that the government work had apparently have learned from the shortcomings of the fire safety residential building bills, and thus I see it worthy of support. In these few years, we have one or two severe fire incidents. In 2016, the Alto Amoy industrial building, which caused the deaths of 2 firemen and the injuries of a few other firemen. And this tragedy had aroused public concern on the mini storage operators, and facilitated this bill. One, the focus being that since the old industrial building does not have automatic sprinkler system, which have caused the flame to quickly fan throughout the buildings. With this bill, we hope that this old industrial building can be safer. However, for the implementation and the latest standards, we have quite a dilemma. The biggest challenges was that the objective condition of the industrial building may not comply with the current fire safety standards, since they were built to the prevailing standards. As we can see that the fire safety standards that years ago are simply inappropriate nowadays. For the owner of these older buildings to enhance fire safety, that would actually be quite challenging with them. Money is one issue, but some of them could not be resolved by putting more money. The government may require them to undertake such works, and yes, this building is too old and not able to carry it out. And in the Bills Committee report, the FST may require them to add a refuge floor as well as staircase interchange or firefighting and rescue stairways. However, they could be impossible for old IBs. Or, for example, they would need to buy a water tank for automatic sprinklers. However, due to the loading capacity of this building, could not withstand having a new tank. In terms of discretion, they have some flexibility. It would not mandatory require the owners to install them. For the discretion, see as positive. Our colleagues will also consider what you give out discretion. Would there be an aligned standards, and would that give rise to any ambiguity or gray area? So, in response to our inquiries, the administration stated it would claim that will deal with for the individual circumstances. You see that as a pragmatic approach, which is much more preferred than clearly expressing all the requirements, which I see as more feasible and more professional, or rely on professional judgment and deferring to the FSD and the professionals and authorized person to handle situation like these. And another concern, there are quite a few older industrial buildings, and the front line have this manpower crunch. To remove illegal structures, the buildings department currently does not have enough manpower to handle the routine UBW cases. And with this new case law, the frontline might not be adequately staffed. I hope the government can recruit more staffs in order to right-size their workload and to expedite this approval of such installation works. Upon the passage of this bill today, there will also we create some inconvenience for the owners and occupiers. However, to prevent fires and protect the safety of property and lives, I suppose that these inconveniences will be accommodated. I hope that the public and the owners can actively work with the buildings department and the FST. On the other hand, I hope, well, to the Secretary, I hope in your enforcement you should keep your flexibility and also take a proactive approach in helping the members of the public and owners to address their challenges, so that they would feel that the government is really on how to protect their safety by enacting this bill instead of making things difficult for them. I hope that you can take a people-centered approach in implementing this law so that you can be more effective. I so submit. Does any member wish to speak? If not, I ask the Secretary for Security to speak, and then to come to a close. Speaker of. First, I would like to thank Paul, Tony Shed, and the members and Secretariat for the effort in the Bills Committee for the successful completion of this deliberation of this bill last year. I would like to thank different organizations and individuals to state their views to the Bills Committee on this bill and on enhancing safety of older industrial buildings. While the current fire safety installations of buildings usually comply with the prevailing standard at that time, however, for those of the older buildings, the standard may fall short of the current day's requirements. Thus, it's necessary by way of legislation to enhance the fire safety of the older IB to current standards for better protection to the public. That the two enforcement authorities, which is the Director of Fire Services and the Director of Buildings, the empowered FSD and BD staff, and after making inspection of the target IB, would issue fire safety directions (FSD) to the owners and the occupants, and require them within a stipulated period to enhance the fire safety standards of the buildings. For fire installation and equipment, they would need to install automatic sprinkler system, the fire hydrant and hose reel system, and backup power supply. On fire safety construction, they would to carry enhancement on the means of escape and fireproof structure. Without reasonable defense, the owner and the occupants refuse to comply with the fire safety instruction. The EA, when apply a fire safety compliance order (FSCO) from the magistracy, direct the owner and the occupier to comply with the compliance order. If the owner or occupier fails to comply the fire safety instruction or the FSCO, and while the occupying the structure will lead to a great fire hazard, the EAs can apply a prohibition order from the district court to prohibit the occupancy of the industrial building or any parts of it. And Madam Deputy, and in the course of deliberation, the members and the organizations generally support this bill and also provide their valuable input on the implementation details. And in response to the comments of the BC, I will move amendments a bit later. In the course of deliberation, the members and the organizations are concerned how the government would assist the owner of the occupiers in complying with the FSI. On this, the Fire Safety Department and the BG will appoint case officers that to follow up on the targeted IBs and will adopt a flexible and pragmatic manner in dealing with each case, and depend on the circumstance of each case, and allowing the owner and occupant to adopt alternative measures. And upon the passage of this amendment bill, the FSD will, together with the BD, will commence the inspection in earnest. First, they will deal with the 400 buildings that were constructed or had their building plan submitted on or before March 1973, as most of these IBs are not equipped with the automatic sprinkler system. Deputy, enhancing the fire safety ODIB is a key important task and should not go without delay. I hope that upon the passage of this bill, the railway owners and occupiers of the targeted IB shall comply with the instruction issued with the FSD and the BD and complete the required works to afford better protection for the lives and the property of the members of the public. I so submit. Last
question to you, that the Fire Safety Industrial Buildings Bill be read the second time. Will those in favor please raise their hands? Those against, please raise their hands. I think the question is agreed by a majority of the members present. I declare the motion passed. Fire Safety Industrial Buildings Bill. This council now becomes Committee